Hello everyone. Today's video is going to be about cost of living in Canada. I get this question a lot from my family and friends. How much money do you need to survive here? Or how expensive is a good lifestyle? Well, the answer to these questions can vary based on a lot of different factors. In today's video, we are going to discuss about these factors and we'll try to answer this question for you. Now let's jump into this video without wasting much time.
First, some geography. As place is the most important factor for cost of living in any country. Canada is the second largest country on earth, yet less than 40 million people live here. Winters can get pretty harsh here, and most of the people choose to live in either Ontario or British Columbia, where the weather is somewhat better. British Columbia is on the west coast and has cities like Vancouver and Victoria. Ontario is on the east coast and is home to Toronto. The living expenses vary a bit between the two coasts, but for this video we are going to focus on Toronto, as most of the people moving to Canada choose to live here. Now, why does everyone want to live here? Simple, more opportunities. More people leads to more jobs and more jobs lead to more people. Now let's start by looking at the primary drivers for cost of living. Rent, utilities, groceries or food, transportations and other expenses. We are going to look at all these expenses in detail in this video. Let's start with housing. The cost of housing largely depends upon three factors: location, type of house, and the size. Since this video is for people who are new to the country or planning to move here, we are only going to discuss rent. For easy reference, we have a map of City of Toronto in front of us. In red is core downtown, which is the central business district, and a large number of people commute to this area on a daily basis. Some people try to live close to this area to avoid the long commutes, but rents are fairly expensive. A one-bedroom apartment in downtown Toronto would be around $2,200 a month. This area contains mostly apartment buildings, and you won't be able to find a house or a basement easily. A two-bedroom apartment in this area would cost around $2,800 a month. Now again, this is the average. You can get it for more or less depending upon the circumstances. The green area on the map is non-core downtown Toronto. Most people try to live in this area as it is a nice match of affordability and a short commute. This area contains a fair mix of apartment buildings and houses. The good thing about this area is there is plenty of parks. Traffic is not as bad and it's slightly less expensive. It's a good place to raise a family, but owning a house here is still very expensive due to high demand. Rents can range from $1,000 to $3,000 depending on what you want. A one-bedroom apartment would be $2,000 a month, but a newcomer to Canada can choose to live in a basement and save some money. And some basements are really well made, like the one shown here. You can't even tell that you are looking at a basement apartment just by looking at the pictures. Finally, we move to the suburbs. You should be able to notice a few cities outside the green area: Mississauga, Brampton, Vaughan, and Markham. Suburbs are a good place to live, as houses are not as expensive and not everyone works in downtown Toronto. Now rents are comparatively cheaper here, but still expensive compared to some other countries. You can get a basement apartment for $850 a month, even less if you are lucky. But if you want to live in a two-bedroom apartment in a good part of the city, you will still have to shell out over $2,000 a month. Next, utilities. Expenses for utilities are more or less fixed every month and include the bills you pay for electricity, cell phone, and internet. These expenses don't change much by location and largely depend on your lifestyle. Looking at the table in front of us, your home utility expenses, which are electricity, gas, and water, depend upon the size of your home. The bigger the home, the higher the expenses. They can range from $50 per month for a one-bedroom home to $150 for a three-bedroom one. For your cell phone, if you can get by with a basic plan without any phone, you'll be paying $40 a month. If you want higher data and a flashy iPhone, then you should probably look at spending close to $80 a month. Internet also follows the same concept. A 50 Mbps internet plan with Netflix is more than sufficient for most people. But if you want even higher speeds with access to sports channels, expect to pay a premium. I just want to clarify here that these rates are not the published rates you'll find on the websites. You'll have to look for discounts and bargain with the companies, but the whole process is fairly simple and anyone can do it. Groceries or your food expenses depend very much on your lifestyle. Your weekly grocery bill would depend on what you eat and where you shop. A vegetarian person's grocery is going to cost significantly less than a person who consumes meat and dairy regularly. Grocery bill for a person who eats simple food can be as low as $30 a week. But if you eat meat and buy organic food only, it can go as high as $100. Another factor for your food bill would be how many times you eat outside. You can eat at McDonald's for as low as a few dollars per meal, or go to an expensive restaurant and spend over $30 for one. In this table, we are looking at a few different scenarios for a newcomer to Canada. If you want to spend the bare minimum on grocery and limit eating outside, you can expect to spend roughly $240 a month per person. If you prefer eating outside more than cooking at home, your grocery bill will go down slightly. But eating regularly at restaurants can get very expensive very quick. If you, on an average, eat 10 meals at a restaurant for an average of $20 per meal, you'll be spending more than $900 per month on food alone. Again, this is no exact science, but a rough estimate of what your monthly expense would look like based on your habits. Transportation expenses would be for using the transit or owning a car. Let's discuss transit first. Most newcomers to Canada can live without a car for a year or two, as transit is fairly good in Toronto. Transit cost will depend a lot on where you live and where you work. The minimum fare starts at $3 per ride for a bus with an option for transfers. If you live in downtown Toronto, there is a good chance that you can walk to work every day and pay nothing for transit. If you live in non-core downtown and work in downtown, transit should be around $6 to $10 per day depending upon where you live. If you live in the suburbs and commute to downtown, expect to pay $15 to $20 a day. Yes, it can get quite expensive if you are taking the train. These daily expenses add up quickly if you add them up for 20 working days a month. If you live in one suburb and work in another, chances are transit will take a long time and you are better off using a car. Buying a car in Canada is cheap. Even if you are working minimum wage, you can afford the payments. Maintaining the car is what's actually expensive. You have to pay monthly insurance, maintenance cost, and finally gas. In Canada, you don't have to actually buy the car or finance it. You can lease it. Leasing is when you pay a fixed monthly sum to the dealership for driving a car. The contract has a fixed length of anywhere between 12 to 84 months and the car is yours for that time. At the end of the lease period, you can either buy the car or simply go lease a new one. Some people like it as they want a new car every few years. Lease or finance cost of a car largely depends on what you buy. A decently equipped Corolla would cost somewhere around $300 per month, whereas if you want to go all out and buy an Audi, it will set you back by $1,000 per month. The next biggest expense for owning a car is insurance. The monthly insurance premium depends on a lot of factors like your age, driving experience, your residence, location, and how much you drive. Insurance, especially in Ontario, is very expensive for a newcomer. Unless you have prior North American driving experience, you are considered a new driver here, and insurance premiums for new drivers are really high. I pulled a quick quote for a 28-year-old driver with no North American driving experience. Yep, $400 a month. You can find ways to lower this number by shopping around with different companies, but expect to pay close to $300 a month. Yes, this is as much as your car lease payments. No joke. Then there is maintenance expenses and cost of running your car. Maintenance depends on the age and type of your car. We won't be factoring those expenses here. Finally, cost of running the car. A tank of fuel in Canada would cost you around $50 and on an average last for 500 kilometers. 2 tanks per month is sufficient for most people who don't use cars for commuting. Now let's look at some of scenarios for transportation expenses. If you live in downtown, you can walk to work and wouldn't probably need a car as everything is really close by. If you want to do a road trip, you can always rent a car, which is a cheaper option than owning one. If you live outside downtown in Toronto, you'll probably have to spend some money on transit, but you can still manage without a car, as all amenities should be available within walking distance. Finally, the suburbs. You can manage without a car here as well, but you'll have to find a residence in a good location. But if you do get a car, it's going to be an expensive affair. Finally, all the other expenses. These expenses would depend on your habits and lifestyle. These could include gym memberships, movie tickets, shopping trips, etc. We are not going to discuss these here in the interest of time and because of the fact that they can be managed based on your circumstances. Since we've looked at all the expenses in detail, it's time to summarize everything. Let's look at some different scenarios for a newcomer moving to Canada. You could either be moving alone or with your spouse or with children. Where you live and how much you spend will ultimately depend on your preferences, but I have tried to put together 4 cases here with a list of all the expenses. Let's start with the first case. This could be a single person who likes the downtown life and lives alone in a 1-bedroom apartment, paying $2,250 a month as rent. Utilities is fairly average with the exception of the high monthly expense for phone. Grocery is the average expense and this person eats on an average 5 meals per week outside, and since it's downtown, meals would be slightly expensive at an average of $22 per meal. Work is within walking distance and no transportation expenses. And for the other expenses, this person has a gym membership and spends some money on alcohol every month. So the total expenses for this person would be $3,170. Quite high for a single person, but that's the price you pay for living in downtown. Let's look at the second scenario. A couple living in non-core downtown Toronto renting a 1-bedroom apartment for $2,000 per month. Utilities and internet would be the same, but you would have to pay for 2 cell phone plans. The couple has similar eating habits as the person in the first case, but this expense double up since it's for 2 people. Let's say both people work in downtown Toronto and spend $120 each to go to work. Both have a gym membership, putting their monthly expenses at $3,630. Let's say this couple was living in downtown instead. They would be paying an additional rent of $250, but they would be saving $240 in transit. So that's only an additional expense of $10 and you save a lot of time as well, going to work every day. There could be a few different reasons why someone wouldn't want to live downtown. 1. You can't find a decently sized apartment in downtown and it's really tough to come across good places to rent. 2. Downtown is the place if you like to party, but if you enjoy taking a peaceful walk at night with your spouse, you don't have a lot of places in downtown for that. 3. You could be living outside downtown, but still be within walking distance of your work. So in the end, it depends on personal preference. Let's move on to the third case. This is a husband and wife who have recently moved to the country and are trying to manage their expenses. They are renting a basement apartment in the suburbs for $850 a month. Utilities is average. For food, they try to eat as much as they can at home to save money, so the restaurant expense is fairly small. One person commutes to downtown while the other person works close by, so transit is $300 and $120 respectively. Only one person goes to the gym and their total expenses for the month would be close to $1,950. This is a very realistic estimate for someone who is looking to move to Canada and wants to spend as less as possible while they find their footing here. You can even take out the transit expenses if you are not working initially and just trying to look for a job. The final case would be for a couple with a kid. Now, they rent a 2-bedroom house costing them $2,450 per month. Utilities would be higher because of the size of the house. The remaining utilities are fairly average. Grocery expenses would be higher as you'll have to include grocery for the kid as well. Transportation expenses is what hurts the most. On top of the transit for one person, you'll need a car for the kid. Let's say the couple has an SUV, so they are paying $935 a month for the vehicle. You can't use the car for commuting to Toronto because of traffic and high parking fees. In their other expenses, you can expect to add an additional $100 for miscellaneous expenses for your child. You will also need a budget for childcare expenses if your child is young and both the parents are working. You cannot leave a child unsupervised at home if he or she is below the age of 12, and you'll have to pay for childcare expenses, which is very expensive in Canada. you could be looking at paying more than $1,000 for childcare expenses every month. So yes, raising a family comes with a price here. In this example, the average expense for the family is $4,850, but it could be even higher if you factor in the childcare expenses. Now, please bear in mind that all these expenses are bare minimum, and you'll have to spend this much just to survive here. You can add in expenses for recreation, travel, clothes, electronics, etc. As you have seen, living in Toronto comes with a high price tag. I think one of the biggest reasons for that is the recent increase in rent. 25% of the people in the Toronto area spend more than 50% of their incomes for rent. Real estate in general is very pricey in Toronto due to high demand in this area. But the good news is you can still manage these expenses. Even if a husband and wife work the minimum wage, which is $14 an hour, for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and 4 weeks a month, they are making almost $4,500. And as we refer back to the summary table, you can see that the couple can live very comfortably off that income. And as you start finding opportunities, you start making more money and slowly settling in. Before we close off, I'll again like to remind you that all the numbers shared in this video are rough estimates and would vary based on a lot of different factors, but they are not very far from the truth.
I hope you liked this video and all the details I have tried to put in here. Of course, there is so much more to be discussed, but I have tried to keep it as concise as possible. If you have any question, let me know in the comments below. And yes, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button.